Good afternoon and welcome to Lunch Break Live with Tea Party Patriots Action. I'm Bill Pasco, Tea Party Patriots man in Washington, and I'll be guiding you through the call to action and the Washington Report this week. Let's get right to it. The House is out this week on 48 hours notice. That is, if the Speaker decides to bring the House back into session, he says he'll give everyone 48 hours notice. The Senate will come back into session today and may leave Thursday. We'll see. Last week in the Senate came back on Monday and voted to end debate on the nomination of Michael Waltz to serve as a representative of the United States to the sessions of the General Assembly of the United Nations. Then the Senate voted to confirm him to that position. Then the Senate took up the motion to end debate, that is, to end the filibuster, on the motion to proceed to S-2806, the vehicle for the continuing resolution. That motion was rejected. On Tuesday, the Senate took up S-2882, the Democrats' continuing resolution counterproposal. That was rejected. Then the Senate took up on reconsideration H.R. 5371. That's the House-passed short-term CR that keeps the government open till November 21. That was defeated again by a vote of 55 to 45, with one Republican, Rand Paul of Kentucky, voting against it, and three Democrats, actually two Democrats and one independent who caucuses with the Democrats, Angus King of Maine, along with Catherine Cortez Masto of Nevada and Jeanne Shaheen of New Hampshire, voting for it, 55 to 45. It failed to reach 60. On Wednesday, the Senate tried again. First up was a motion to end debate on the motion to proceed to the Democrats' counterproposal CR. That was rejected. Then the Senate rejected an attempt to end debate on the motion to end debate on the motion to proceed to H.R. 5371, the House-passed CR. It failed on Wednesday by the same 55 to 45 vote as it had failed on Tuesday. Then the Senate voted to end debate on and then to confirm the nomination of Hung Kao to serve as Undersecretary of the Navy. Then the Senate agreed to end debate on Executive Calendar Number 2, S-Res 412, an executive resolution authorizing the en bloc consideration in executive session of certain nominations on the executive calendar. This was the second en bloc resolution since Senate Majority Leader John Thune deployed the nuclear option to make it easier to confirm Trump nominees by doing it en bloc, en masse. This time it contained 108 nominations for executive branch positions. The Senate was out of session on Thursday because of the Yom Kippur Jewish holiday, so when it returned on Friday, the Senate picked up where it had left off with that en bloc resolution on nominations. This time the vote was on final passage, and it was agreed to by a vote of 51 to 46. Then, just for giggles, the Senate tried to end debate on the Democrats' counterproposal CR, and it failed. Then the Senate, just for good measure, tried to end debate once again on the House-passed continuing resolution, and that motion failed again with the same three Democrats crossing party lines to vote with the Republicans, but no others joined them, and then they were done. This week in the Senate will come back today with the first vote set for 5:30 p.m. At that time, the Senate will proceed to three roll call votes. First, a vote to end debate on the motion to proceed to the Democrats' counter-proposal continuing resolution. If debate is not ended, as I expect it will not be, the Senate will vote on the motion to end debate on the motion to proceed to H.R. 5371, the House-passed short-term continuing resolution. If debate is not ended, as I imagine it will not be, the Senate will vote on the motion to end debate on the en bloc nominations listed pursuant to S-Res 412. And then we'll see what happens. Now let's talk about Bari Weiss running CBS News. Stephen Colbert lost his job at CBS, and Bari Weiss is joining the Tiffany Network as editor-in-chief of CBS News, according to an email she sent this morning to subscribers of her news outlet, the Free Press. In what the New York Post calls a remarkable reshuffle of CBS News' decades-old managerial structure, unquote, Weiss will report directly to Paramount Skydance chief executive David Ellison. Now, Paramount Skydance owns CBS. So she's not talking to the head of CBS. She's talking above the head of CBS directly to the CEO of Paramount Skydance. This direct line to the CEO of CBS's owner means she will bypass reporting to the president of CBS News, Tom Sobrowski, who himself reports to George Cheeks, the chair of TV media at Paramount Skydance, who by definition is not the CEO of Paramount Skydance, which means he is by definition below the CEO of Paramount Skydance on the totem pole. So the president of CBS News reports to the Paramount CEO's underling, while the new editor-in-chief of CBS News reports directly to the CEO of Paramount Skydance, which owns CBS. All of which has some observers wondering how long it might be before Weiss takes over CBS News entirely. In addition to Weiss joining CBS News, the Free Press has been acquired by Paramount Skydance for a purchase price of, wait for it, $150 million. Stay tuned. Now, Trump deploys the National Guard. A week ago Saturday, President Trump said he would send troops to Portland, Oregon, quote, authorizing full force with a capital F and a capital F, if necessary, unquote, to handle what he called domestic terrorists who have made life difficult for agents of immigration and customs enforcement in the city. In a social media post, Trump said he was directing the Department of War to, quote, provide all necessary troops to protect war-ravaged Portland, unquote, and said they were needed to protect ICE facilities, which he alleged are, quote, under siege from attack by Antifa and other domestic terrorists, unquote. Oregon's Democrat governor, Tina Kotek, responded by saying Trump is abusing his authority by ordering troops into a city that she said is doing, quote, just fine, quote, end quote, on its own, reported the Associated Press. Kotek said she had said so directly to Trump and Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem. And she said she believes he does not have the authority to deploy the troops there. Federal District Judge Karen Immergut, who was appointed to the federal bench by Trump in his first term, agreed with Governor Kotek, ruling Saturday in a lawsuit brought by the state and city that Trump's order deploying the troops should be blocked pending further arguments in the lawsuit. She said the relatively small protests the city has witnessed did not justify the deployment of federal troops, and said that allowing the deployment could harm Oregon's state sovereignty. Quote, this country has a long-standing and foundational tradition of resistance to government overreach, especially in the form of military intrusion into civil affairs, she wrote. Quote, this historical tradition boils down to a simple proposition. This is a nation of constitutional law, not martial law, unquote. Late Saturday, the Trump DOJ filed a notice of appeal to the Ninth U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals. Meanwhile, President Trump also, Saturday, authorized 300 National Guardsmen to protect federal officers and assets in Chicagoland. According to Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker, a Democrat, the Trump administration demanded that he call in the Illinois National Guard, or the War Department would federalize 300 members of that Illinois National Guard. Pritzker refused, so Trump ordered the federalization of Illinois National Guard troops. In Oregon, the Trump administration read Judge Immergut's ruling to mean that the president was blocked from deploying troops from the Oregon National Guard. But, the administration's lawyers reasoned, she didn't say anything in her order about blocking National Guard troops from other states from doing what Trump wanted done. So, War Secretary Pete Hegseth ordered 200 National Guardsmen from California to go to Oregon to carry out Trump's wishes. And then Hegseth got an agreement from Texas Governor Greg Abbott to send hundreds of National Guard troops from Texas, too. In a late-night telephone hearing on Sunday, Judge Immergut seemed astonished that the Trump administration would try to circumvent her order. She said their effort was, quote, in direct contravention, unquote, of her earlier ruling. Quote, I am certainly troubled by now hearing that both California and Texas National Guard are being sent to Oregon, which does appear to be in direct contravention of my order, unquote, she said, describing the latest deployments as a violation of federal law and the 10th Amendment to the Constitution, which protects state sovereignty. The Ninth U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals will likely rule soon. Now, to government spending, deal or no deal. We're now 6 days into a government shutdown, and believe it or not, that makes this the fourth longest government shutdown in history. This is only the 11th time that the federal government has shut down, and 6 of them, a majority, lasted no longer than 3 days. The longest shutdown was 35 days, from December 22, 2018 to January 25, 2019, during President Trump's first term. That shutdown was tied to border wall funding. Now, from my point of view, both sets of political leaders have misplayed their hand. Democrats decided to shut down the government because they wanted to use the one piece of leverage they have, that is, Senate Democrats' power to deny the floor to Senate Republicans by refusing to give them the votes needed to defeat a filibuster, to draw the nation's attention to what they see as the ongoing health care crisis. They want everyone to know that the Obamacare premium tax credits they created in the beginning of the COVID pandemic are going to expire, as they were planned to, and they want to extend them. And they believe the Republicans don't. And therefore, the Republicans are about to cause another health care crisis. So, the Democrats' plan from the beginning was to own the shutdown and use the attention to focus on health care, an issue where they typically win. So, they voted to shut down the government, and then they said it was the Republicans' fault. They blame Republicans and want the public to blame the Republicans. That's contrary to the strategy they laid out. On the other side, Republicans put a clean CR on the floor and passed it through the House and set it up in the Senate. And their strategy was to insist that everyone focus on the fact that they were simply trying to keep the government open while negotiations continue. And they said there was nothing to negotiate. But then both Majority Leader Thune and Speaker Johnson said that, of course, they would be happy to talk with the Democrats about extending Obamacare premium tax credits. That's what the Democrats insist they want, and the Republican leaders say they'll be happy to talk about those as soon as the Democrats vote to reopen the government. And not only that, but Leader Thune sent the Senate home for the weekend, when I think they should have stayed in Washington over the weekend and voted a few more times. Instead, they went home Friday. They won't vote again until 5:30 tonight. I think that's a misplayed hand. Nevertheless, both sides are convinced that their political strategy is working. And the polls that have come out are vague enough that if you squint, it might look like your side is winning, or at least not losing yet. So neither side's leadership sees a reason to change their strategy. And that's why I don't see this shutdown ending anytime soon. Now, at the end of the week, on the 11th of October, the first federal workers will miss a paycheck. And on the 15th, which is a week from Wednesday, 9 days from now, the military will miss its first paycheck. Some analysts suggest these dates might be triggering events for one side or the other to blink. We'll see. In the meantime, I spent some time over the weekend doing some light research. It took 173 years of spending for the federal government to hit the $100 billion mark. The budget of the federal government first hit $100 billion in fiscal year 1962, when outlays hit $106.8 billion. Think of that, 1962. The federal government spent $106.8 billion. It took another 8 years until 1970 to hit the $200 billion mark. We spent a total of $210 billion in fiscal 1970. 9 years later, in 1979, the budget had more than doubled to $504 billion. Took another 8 years to double that budget. In fiscal 1987, we spent $1,004,000,000,000. It took longer to double that budget. It required 15 years to get from a $1 trillion budget to a $2 trillion budget. Fiscal 2002, we spent $2,010,000,000,000. We crossed the $3 trillion threshold in 2009 when we spent $3.52 trillion. 8 years later, we crossed the $4 trillion threshold when we spent $4 trillion even. But it took us only 3 years after that to break the $5 trillion barrier, and we blew right by it without even stopping to notice that we had spent more than $5 trillion in 1 year, because while in fiscal 2019 we spent $4.45 trillion, in fiscal 2020 we jumped up to $6.55 trillion. That is, we increased the budget by almost 50% in 1 year. Why? Because that was the year COVID hit. So in 1 year, we blew past both the $5 trillion and the $6 trillion marks. Then in fiscal 2021, we spent $7.26 trillion. Then COVID left, and our spending went back to the pre-COVID levels. Oh, wait, no, I'm sorry. No, we didn't. COVID left, but we continued spending at exorbitant levels. We spent $6.01 trillion in FY 2022, $6.01 trillion in FY 2023, $6.19 trillion in FY 2024, and $6.51 trillion in FY 2025. Now, here's the really troubling part of the exercise. If you take that 1962 number, about $107 billion, and you pop it into the Bureau of Labor Statistics CPI calculator, you learn that according to the federal government, we've endured 972.77% inflation. 972.77% inflation over the 63 years since 1962, meaning prices are 10.73 times higher. 10.73 times higher, meaning that if the federal government had only spent enough money each year to keep pace with inflation, 1962 spending in today's dollars would equal about $1.15 trillion. Yet this year the federal government spent more than 5 times as much, $6.5 trillion. So when you hear conservatives declare that the federal government spends too much money on too many things, you know where that's coming from. What's that, you say? How has our debt grown in the same time frame? Well, I'm glad you asked, because that was part of my research too. It took us almost 200 years, from 1789 until 1981, for us to accumulate $1 trillion in debt. Only 5 years later, the debt had doubled to $2 trillion. By 1996, it was $5 trillion. By 2008, it had doubled again to $10 trillion. By 2017, it had doubled again to $20 trillion. It took 3 years until 2020 to get to $25 trillion. Then, over the next 4 years, between 2020 and 2024, the national debt rose to $35 trillion. And this fiscal year, we spent $1.9 trillion more than we took in, so the national debt rose to $37 trillion. And CBO projects that the national debt will increase by $2 trillion per year for the next 10 years. So it won't be long before we're looking at a national debt on the order of $50 trillion. We now spend more money paying interest on our debt than we spend on our national defense. And the Democrats are voting to shut down the government and keep the government closed so they can add another $350 billion to the national debt over the next 10 years with their enhanced Obamacare premium tax credits, and another $1 trillion to the national debt to restore the Medicaid savings we achieved in July when we passed the Working Families Tax Credit. Stay tuned. Now to the latest on the Jenny Beth Show. On Wednesday, episode 141 of the Jenny Beth Show dropped, featuring Jenny Beth's conversation with Gregory Britton of the Redlands Tea Party Patriots in the Inland Empire of California. The two discuss why the fight to save America starts with ordinary citizens taking action. From school board battles and exposing radical legislation in California to the national push for only citizens voting, Gregory shares how grassroots patriots can make a real difference. Discover the power of local activism, the dangers of the left's agenda, and why defending freedom requires every citizen to step up. As always, it's highly recommended. And that's our Washington Report for this week. Now to the call to action. The Election Assistance Commission is now taking public comments in support of the petition filed by America First Legal Foundation, asking the EAC to change the voter registration form to include a requirement for proof of citizenship. If you go to www.regulations.gov, that's www.regulations.gov, you'll find a search box right in the middle of the page. You type in America First Legal Foundation, and you'll get search results. And the very first search result says, Petition of America First Legal Foundation for Rule Making. That's the one you want. Click on that link, and it'll take you to the comments page for the AFL petition, and you'll see a box there that says, Comment. Move the cursor there, click it, and you'll be able to enter your comment up to 5,000 characters. The comments period is open for another 2 weeks, until Monday, October 20, 14 days from now. Then, once you've done that, you can follow through on our second call to action for this week, and that is to call Senate Democrats and tell them you oppose a government shutdown and you support passage of a clean funding resolution, a clean CR. Democrats are demanding more than $1 trillion in additional funding, and they want it added to this short-term temporary funding resolution. That's not the way to do it. All we're trying to do now is keep the government open at current funding levels. Democrats should not be threatening to shut down the government if they don't get what they want. That's just wrong. So please call Senate Democrats. Let them know you support a clean funding resolution, a clean CR. Well, that's our broadcast for this week. We'll see you next week. Same place, same time. Until then, be well and be active.